SATSANG 2. AYOUN. Figures. July 21, 2019. Okay, well, we're talking about what you want. No questions. Brother, well, if finally, the mushroom of heresium. But it is useful for everyone, in fact. Brother, is it recommended for everyone? Oh yes, yes, yes. What I was explaining, that is, that all human beings, with the Western diet, even if it is organic, there are still significant imbalances, as I was saying, between sugar and fat, and that all people, even without any digestive disorder, we admit that between 40 and 50 years old, there are no more intestinal villi, so this is what triggers what is called gluten intolerance, which is not the celiac disease known in babies at all. Gluten intolerance is simply the result of the disappearance of the villi. But not everyone suffers from gluten intolerance, but intestinal malabsorption is constant, and of course is at the expense of fat. Restoration necessarily involves mycolein. It is the only product that is able to restore the digestive mucosa, i.e. the villi. And intestinal villi are extremely important, which is what allows digestion in the small intestine, and also, this is where all the subprophytic bacteria, the so-called microbiota, will nest. So people spend their time taking microbiotics to improve their intestinal flora, and, of course, the intestinal flora, whether of animal or even human origin, because there are lats that have created human strains, they can't establish themselves and colonize the intestine. So they are eliminated. When it is animal after 3 weeks, when it is human after 2 months, there is nothing left. And people take back microbiotes all the time, which is absolutely useless. If you restore intestinal villi, you naturally restore what is called the microbiota, and the microbiota, I remind you, is very important, because we know today that it is the bacteria in the stomach that dictate our behavior, much more than our own neurotransmitters. That is, I explained, someone who has a sugar addiction is because he no longer has any velocity. Of course, the fat is no longer absorbed, so his cycle works permanently on the so-called Krebs cycle and his sugar metabolism, and then, at that moment, obviously, lots of disorders appear. Not only in terms of weight, or in terms of regulating the different systems, but also in terms of mood. I explained the example, for example, someone who is constantly attracted by dairy products, by everything that is milk. It does not come from him, it comes from the intestinal microbiota with an imbalance of flora and a proliferation of what I called the monilial beacons, which itself induces a demand for sugar. So we are all subjected to a bacterial slavery of our stomach, and, of course, when the normal microbiota is no longer there are lots of imbalances that appear, in terms of taste, in terms of addictions, in terms of the need for certain foods, which is not physiological, which corresponds to the physiology of your bacteria. So heresium, yes, it's really something that all people absorbed when they heard and saw the effects, of course. Then there are lots of other mushrooms, of course, but we don't have time to talk about them, but in the dietary measures I gave in the SATSANG on dietetics, I explained it again perfectly. Which simply means that even without will, since we cannot achieve this by the will to stop sugar, already by increasing fat as I said, by prescribing heresium and after krill oil, you restore a global physiology that is almost perfect. So most of the so-called chronic, degenerative and psychological diseases, I am not talking about psychiatric diseases or even neurological diseases, but behavioral disorders are almost exclusively linked to this imbalance. And by the way, all people, well, because we've been talking about heresium for years and there are thousands and thousands of people who have taken it, we all see the same effect, that is, regulation if there were digestive disorders, diarrhea, constipation, flatulence, bloating, stomach aches, everything we can imagine in the digestive system is restored, and it's hard. In other words, it's not something we're going to take to compensate, it really restores the villi, and the villi will last for decades. So it's really a treatment that's perfectly adapted, I would say to everyone. It is not even a treatment, we are going to talk about restoration of the intestinal mucosa, which has a fundamental role, I repeat, to play. We know that today, more and more people are interested in the intestinal flora, because it is really responsible for states of behavioral and metabolic alterations. There you go. And that, well, the restoration of the microbiota, that is to say that all people who are sensitive to it, who take lactic ferments, as we used to say in the past, notice an effect, but everyone also notices that the effect does not last. You stop microbiotics, it's over. So restoring the intestinal flora does not involve bringing yeast, but restoring the villi. Quite simply. All the metabolism of the intestine, all the chemistry of the intestine is done, the metabolization of the food bowl is done in the small intestine. And of course, not to mention, I'm also thinking of the restoration of the colon mucosa, which is extremely important, because we know, for example, that someone who eats a lot of red meat has a greater chance of developing colon cancer, as we know. Simply because the mucosa is altered. So there is a complete effect of Hericium, not to mention that all fungi, not just Hericium, but all fungi contain EPA DHA, or whatever the names are and what it means, fats, lipoproteins that will come, at the body level, not just to the target, but to restore the cell membrane. We now know, for example, that cancer is linked to an alkaline soil that turns into acidic soil. Acidosis triggers, in a first phase, hyperacidosis that triggers cancer. So of course, until now everyone was fighting to know if acidosis, the modification of the blood pH, was the cause or consequence of something else, of course. And when you repair the cell membrane, and all fungi do without exception, because they contain certain common molecules, in particular those that are part of the constitution of the membranes, you realize that you completely modify the acid soil, so there is a fundamental role. And I would like to point out that only fungi, all fungi, possess these molecules, and in particular EPA DHA, which are two varieties of microproteins, but which are not synthesized by humans. So it will put an end, I would say, to metabolic deposition disorders, and I am thinking in particular of inflammatory arterial disease, which is the cause of what we call vascular accidents, myocardial infarction, and all that. So there is a preventive role that is absolutely major. Sister. So the microlein balances the pH. Oh, yes, of course. But all fungi do that, I just said, not that microlein, all fungi contain EPA, DHA or lipoproteins too, which all go into the constitution of cell membranes. And we know today, for example, by studying mushrooms, that their underground network, which is much more important than the mushroom, called the mycelium, carries information over tens of kilometers. Mycelia are very, very long, they are not a few meters long, they are several tens or even several kilometers long, and they are a system of information highways, which circulates information about what are called cells that constitute the mycelium, which are very particular cells. We call them cells, because they have a shape of a block about them, but rather a rectangle, I would say. And the structure of the membrane, since there is no nervous system, there is not a wave that propagates in the mycelium like in a nerve, but the cellular structure of the membrane, that is what we have in the fungus, of course, and that we eat, allows the passage of information. That is, when there is a functioning cell membrane, there is no reason why your metabolism should not work. Today, for example, we know that DNA can be reprogrammed, can mutate very, very quickly, unlike all the bullshit they used to say before. That's why a branch of genetics has been created, called epigenetics, that is, all the environmental influence. DNA, as you know, captures photons, waves, everything that happens in the environment. The problem is that this capture is absolutely not normal. There should be a barrier, the cell barrier, that should prevent certain signals from entering the core of the nucleus. If there is penetration, it is precisely due to the alteration of the cell membrane. So you will balance the environmental factors by providing the cell with enough to make a correct cell membrane. This is the increasingly important role that mushrooms have. I would like to point out that, for example, in Europe, when you have stomach cancer, you get chemo, radio, surgery. In some Asian countries, not at all. There are fungi that cure colon cancer, Hericium in particular in injection, in injectable extract, and they treat all stomach cancers like that. Of course, in France we don't have the right to know. These studies have appeared in international and scientific journals. Let me take another example. There is a fungus that is the most common, that affects the immune system and in particular that actually treats AIDS. There are studies published from all over Asia. Of course, this molecule is not patentable. It comes from a fungus, and in particular, AIDS is what we call the Coriolis vesicolor. It is a fungus, one of the most common on the planet. It is the fungus that grows a little like on dead trees, or on living trees dying. It makes a kind of language like that. It is a fungus that lives on the tree. There are some everywhere in France, and well, they have forbidden it in France. So, the laboratory still sells it with a new name, but it's Coriolis. But to show stupidity. Colloidal silver, for example, is the most effective product. You take it at the beginning of all infections. Well, it is banned in France. Only there is no point in banning them, since they're available over the counter on the internet. It is to show you that in France, when something is banned, it is precisely because it is effective. Sister. Yes, that's it. Other sister. And how long do we take them? What? Sister. How long do we take them? Of what? Sister. The mushrooms. The mushrooms, the cure of a phase lateral extract, you take, for heresium, a month and a half. The box, that's enough. The villa repaired for decades. On the other hand, after there are fungi that are more specific to certain functions, I gave the example of the Coriolis that is used in diseases of the immune system, and in particular AIDS. This is obviously more complex, because we have to do sequential cures, so we have to repeat the treatment every 3 months, every 4 months, for a year. But the effects are more than convincing. That is, the scientific studies that have been published are all validated. What is most surprising is that they have been published in international journals, in the Internet Medical Reference Server called Medline, which is the official validation today. That is when you were published in the Lancet, of course, in JAMA, the American Medical Journal, and also on Medline. That's it. And on Medline, for example, you have publications on the proof of the action of crystals. Russian works that were done at the beginning of the 20th century, which had already demonstrated the action of crystals on the human body, and on the living. So it's not from today. Well, that's been blackballed. That is, they let the studies appear, but they obviously hide the results from you. For example, when I talk about neuroscience, you have something that is banned in France, called neuromarketing. Neuromarketing, you have to know that there are color codes on a screen, shapes, which trigger you the decision to buy, even if you have not decided to buy. It's awfully simple. Of course, the use of neuromarketing is prohibited, but there are lots of books on neuromarketing that have been translated from the American, and even the big state boxes are happily using neuromarketing to sell. For example, there was even a report by Elizo Sit on the SNCF, which had put a green color with a very particular frequency on their side for Christmas, with shapes of trees, but very stylized, which were made to trigger the purchase of the ticket. It always works every time. So they banned the use for marketing purposes, but of course everyone uses it. We now know how to manipulate, and that I refer you to a channeling of Wat Aurobindo in 2010 or 2011, where the power of the image was mentioned. The image is printed in you, even if you don't look, even if you look without looking. You look at a shape, this shape has an effect on your behavior, it is the role of the image. All images are simply magic, quite simply, are made to seduce you, without your knowledge of your own free will. The so-called ads all use neuromarketing, playing on the emotional fiber. And the olfactory is the same, as I told you for cars, for yogurts, they work on aromas, on smells, on flavors, even for a car. We know how to deceive human beings in every possible way today, and no one realizes it, when the work is known, published, validated, and it is the sales technologies right now. We know once again how to make you buy a car. You're given a specific smell, you salivate, you have a buying impulse. It's as simple as that. And it's used happily everywhere. That's why I tell you all the time, whatever you decide, it's not you who decide, it's induced first, by your bacteria in the belly, second, by the reptilian brain, survival habits and reflexes, and third, by everything we look at. So, no matter how much we talk about MK Ultra, we are all manipulated without our knowledge, by images, by smells, by colors, by shapes and by flavors. Everyone. And it's happily used. It's not new. Neuromarketing is used, even before we have the neuroscientific evidence of these buying impulses, which are linked to the activation of the reward circuit. As we are always judging each other, I remind you that the stars good and bad are the circuit of reward and punishment. As long as you have not left the matrix, for example, you adhere to a religion, you adhere to a political movement, at that moment, you always have, always, in all human beings, the punishment circuit that is stronger than the reward circuit. So, as soon as a person is faced with a smell, a taste, a color, a shape, an image, which will change this relationship, the reward circuit comes into action. The reward circuit is what? You buy, and you come out happy, but it never lasts. So all the decisions we make are never made by us. It's very clear. It is the result of a program, the reptilian brain. It is the result of the interaction of the senses, and in particular, the sense of smell, taste and sight. Hearing, it is more complicated. We can do it, but it is more complicated to do. But it is the three senses that are used, because we know that by playing on smell and taste, we play on the reptilian brain, that we will activate the reward circuit, and people are very pleased. They delight themselves, they buy and they delight. All marketing works like that, and all the decisions we make are never our own, especially when we are sure that we are the ones who make them. They are induced by the senses and by the reward circuit. Now, you have to know that a mystic, I was talking about mystics yesterday, when there are all the mystical signs, have had their marks on the brain, on the MRIs, but you have to know that the reward circuit only becomes predominant when you have a cerebral edema on what has been called Hitgegnungs, NDT. Here and now, the stars that are above your head on which you have worked boom, 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 and when there is an edema in this area, so it is two cases. Either you have had a heart attack, you are going to die, that's what's demonstrated in integrative medicine, or you are a mutant, that is, you have gone through initiation, but the real one, and you are a mystic, and at that moment we realized that all the people who had made complete NDES, for example, all the people who had real mystical processes, all have this edema at the level of cerebral edema. And we have systematically observed that among these people, the reward circuit becomes predominant on the punishment circuit. Remember, the reward circuit is also linked to neurotransmitters, and in these people, oxytocin, the love hormone, as they say, is in the majority compared to other neurotransmitters. So we know very well that awakening, liberation corresponds to processes that are imprinted in the brain, which can be identified. And when you have the circuit of reward that is always predominant, well, you're in love, you're in gratification, you're in thanks, you're always in joy, there is no more sabotage. Until you're open, you're in permanent self-sabotage. That's the role of the personality, because of the punishment circuit. That is to say, everything that will present itself to you, without your conscious mind knowing, will always judge in good and bad. And, as the circuit of evil is stronger, the person can only see things in black, even if he or she makes an effort. Only when there is an inversion of the relationship in the real mystical processes, when this relationship changes and when people are really in a state of euphoria, love, happiness. But for the person, this is strictly impossible. Today, as I am telling you, we have all the evidence of the difference between a person and a person who is no longer a person, at all levels. It's real. It's true. And you can do nothing about it with your conscience, because everything that is relayed by the brain is false. It's awfully simple. And we see it, through what we call the egregores or the people. The punishment circuit today is so strong, that people accept their own punishment and moreover, everything is done to make them feel guilty. Global warming is your cars, you have to consume less, you have to drive less, etc. So everything is done to punish people and to which they obviously adhere, because they have no way of doing otherwise. And it's the same in emotional life, it's the same at all levels, there's a kind of natural guilt that's present in all people, because of this neurological structure. And you cannot escape this as long as you remain a person, as long as the mystical processes of true openness are not acted upon. And that's why we always say, but it's you who are freed from the person, you're not that person. but it has components, as we have seen, at the behavioral level, at the cognitive level, at the level of intoxication by images, smells and flavors, to which we are all subjected, and we do not see it. However, at the neuroscientific level, we have formal proof that all the metabolic diseases, for example, we were talking about, are linked only to sugar consumption. There is someone here who noticed, on the first day, by not having a normal sweet breakfast, with sugar and everything, by eating sardines, that his tiredness has disappeared. The 11-hour hypoglycemia-related pump failure no longer exists on the same day. As I was saying, the ketogenic diet, but simply by increasing the amount of fat, good and bad, you change, but in 1 week, the whole metabolism. So once again, getting people to accept that, once again, it's much easier to deceive a human being, it's done very quickly, and on the other hand, getting them to admit that they've been deceived is almost impossible, it takes a lot of time. And the ego, the so-called ego, the character, will do everything in its power, through your own bacteria and your punishment circuit, to never make you free. Cognition, consciousness, is slavery. But again, until you are out of consciousness, how do you want to live it, understand it, even if I give you all the scientific explanations, since the character will oppose it himself? That's impossible. It is an endless vicious circle, except, of course, when there is a process of awakening that is real, and which will modify, before modifying the whole physiology, the whole metabolism, will modify, above all, the circuit of reward and punishment. And of course, oxytocin circulating, which explains the euphoria, happiness, love, joy, which are there. Yesterday, I was reading an article, for example, I was not at all aware that the heart has its own brain, that is, that the heart has 40,000 neurons, which are perfectly arranged like the brain, with an extremely complex system of supporting cells, and also present neurotransmitters, and in particular oxytocin. The cardiac field, as I said, is the most powerful electromagnetic field. For example, compared to the written activity of the brain, the heart is 5,000 times more powerful than the brain's radiation. And in addition, they realized, it's a French discovery, that it's not the brain that gives orders to the heart, it's the heart that gives orders to the brain. So all we call the opening of the heart is the release of oxytocin in the heart, we call it the sacred limnisate, which is what connected the heart with the brain in the form of a Modbus tape, and then it becomes completely functional. And at that moment, the heart totally takes the ascendancy on the brain, really and concretely, in behaviors, in habits and in everything. And as long as the heart has not taken over the brain, at the neuroscientific level, you are subjected to a cognitive slavery of the punishment circuit, and of all the flavors, smells, images that will penetrate you, and program you. Unfortunately, that's the way it is for everyone. In addition, when you look at a television screen, there are frequencies, called monitor scanning frequencies, 60 Hz before, 100 Hz now, that emit frequencies that penetrate even deeper into the brain. That's a constant. And I tell you, apart from trying to restore physiology, so good with dietetics, we talked about it at length, but above all, to be clear about it. Without it you are trapped every time, to buy flowers, to buy food, that's why at the time the grandfather had talked about the heart's response to a food, a choice of whatever it is, wait for the heart's response. Without it, your brain is in charge. And your brain is not you. So we are all subjected to cognitive slavery, without searching in karma, in past lives or even in childhood, which are only linked to the ways of functioning today, which have changed human food in an extreme way, which have modified by screens, advertising, images with the invention of cinema, the first screens for more than 130 years, which are now used in a completely lucid and conscious way, to manipulate the crowds. They don't need to fight wars now. You bring the crowds where you want, only through the images, even without mentioning the media that lie, that people know, but it doesn't change anything, because anyway the programming took place, and that even if you say no to an image or something, well, it's too late, you looked at it. And we're all subject to that, without exception. That's it, so that's the objective reality of what humans are, of what's happening today at the global level, and you can't oppose that. Because these people are convinced that they're the ones who think that. You know very well that, for example, in the French presidential elections, it is enough to show an image of a gentleman, more than others, for people to vote for him. That's exactly what they did for Macron. Why do you think they're talking about talking time? They talked about the time of speech, but there is more than just the time of speech, it is the time of the image. Just see the same face everywhere, you will vote for it, and you are convinced that you are the one who chose it, and no one sees it. Whereas, in terms of what is really happening, we are, in scientific terms, perfectly aware of this. It is the human being's nature to be abused by what he sees, by what he feels, by what he touches, and moreover when it is to his advantage, that is to say with will to manipulate, well it works every time. And no one notices it. Because you feel it's natural. And it also leads to guilt, especially when you're in a spiritual process. Those who sleep, they do not ask questions, but as soon as you start to enter a spiritual process, you will oppose these behaviors and you will strengthen them. It's as simple as that. You have no way of escaping it. Brother, yes, but the current, he works on the guilt written in the program. There's no point in working on guilt if you don't eliminate it and see what triggers guilt. Everything you oppose is getting stronger. So working on guilt will increase guilt. It's a monumental bullshit. At the psycho-behavioral level, at the cognitive neuroscience level, it's a monumental mistake. That is, what you are going to work on, what you want to work on, the theory of the complaint that is validated in neuroscience. When you work on a complaint, because you are missing something, or you have too much guilt, or lack of trust, whatever, you just reinforce it. It's dramatic. Sister. But everyone does that. Because everyone, in good faith, is convinced that they will treat their guilt, that they will treat a behavioral disorder by following a spiritual teaching. This is totally false. That's why it's a total scam, it can't work. But no, it's impossible. Brother. Yes, but as a result, he doesn't work on guilt, he transmutes it. Yeah, but to eliminate guilt, how do you do that? Brother. He does it himself. It's the intelligence that works on it and takes it away. Yes, as long as you remain a person, it is impossible, because as long as you are a person, you do not receive light. You have a minimum of light coming in, but as long as the Kekra sheaths are not open, whether you feel them or not, as long as you have not received the light source information, it is the brain that controls. You can't do anything about it. So all these techniques, if you want, for example, in the current, I know the structure of this current, it claims to play on guilt, but at the time it was the same. If you look at another level, for example, Omraam Mikhailov had created the White Brotherhood. All the people who went to the fraternity, we know a lot of them, who live there, we see them today, they are the same, they are always in guilt, they are always in fear. There is no one who approached the grandfather during his lifetime, who left it transformed and open. They all became even more guilty, even more difficult, without exception. It's not grandpa's fault. It's only your fault. As long as you believe you need someone from outside, then you create an addiction yourself. It works in marketing, with politicians, with so-called gurus and with so-called masters, it's the same thing. So obviously, when you don't know, when you don't have information about what neuroscience is, or how all the chemistry of the body and all human behaviors work, well, all behaviors are just cognitive slavery. Everything you repeat every day, telling yourself, yes, I eat at this time, I'm safe, I go to bed at this time, because if I don't go to bed at this time, I won't sleep. It's you who induce slavery. It's as simple as that. Whoever is free, really and concretely, is no longer subject to any kind of timetable. He sleeps when he is sleepy, he eats when he is hungry, not when he has decided, because it is at such a time that he must eat. And that is evident, and we can see the effects, in all the people who have broken out of these unhealthy habits, who supposedly put them in safety, at whatever level, are in error. Everything you oppose, even through behavior, only reinforces itself. And you have no way of escaping it. None, because you yourself train self-programming, which is marked by self-sabotage, and which will make you believe that the more you master something, the more free you will be. Whereas what happens, when we observe over decades, I was talking about the example of the Brotherhood, but you can take the example in political parties, it is exactly the same thing, it is that people are getting worse and worse. There is no space for a solution in the person himself, and everything you are going to oppose, rightly so, as we generally think, will only get stronger. That's what I was telling you, the theory of complaint. When you bring back into the present a suffering element of your story, or you think it, even think it, and if you verbalize it and if you're in psychotherapy, of course you will treat a level, emotional and mental most often, and you are happy. Well, yes, but it goes down to the body level, systematically. It's a total scam. And the discoveries in neuroscience are today, that's why there is, I would say, today, a struggle between what is called psychoanalysis and the cognitive and behavioral therapies that come from neuroscience, and certain psychological discoveries undermine all psychoanalytical theories. That is to say, when you think about your past, you will actually solve an emotional or mental knot, but it leaves marks in your body, always. Except that since pathologies occur 5, 10 or 15 years later, you have no way of making the link except that with neuroscience, it has been done in a formal way. As soon as you think about your past, as soon as you think about yesterday, as soon as you think about your childhood, you reactivate it in the present. And it is obvious, at the time with the work of Yamamoto, who had also worked on the chakras. For example, you say, Dad. You reactivate the second chakra. And everything is active in the present. So imagine someone talking about Dad who had a rape and violence problem, putting him back in the present and triggering a vibratory coding that will go down into the body on the target organ. And all hymns work, which today is validated. You know that in the United States, for example, breast cancer, there are clinics, hundreds of clinics that operate according to HIMSS principles, where they identify before treatment, whether it is therapeutic or alternative chemo, whatever, and especially with immunotherapy that works very well, they know that psychological conflict must first be resolved. That's it, and that if the psychological conflict is resolved, not by a return to the past that is useless, but by what is called cognitive reprogramming that does not deal with what is deficient or pathological but that puts a layer back on top of programming that is no longer functional. But if you touch the knot, which was called as at the time, the little devil in terms of the feeling of being an individual, you will reactivate mechanisms that will target the organs. Well, it's simple, the nest. It's the left breast, the partner. It's the right breast. And there are sometimes even therapies that have been widely praised in Western Europe, particularly in Germany and even in France, called family constellations, which are a trick but dramatic. That is to say, not 5 years ago, it is instantaneous. I have the example, several examples. A patient who had a hereditary fragility to breast cancer, familial. She was coming out of a mammogram, there was nothing. It will make a family constellation. A family constellation, it consists in reenacting the scene, but placing people who have nothing to do with the scenario in the scenario. Energy transfers are immediate. She came out of this weekend, she had an inflammation of the breast, we treated her, of course. A month later, we did a mammo again, there was a devastating cancer, she died. And that's not the only case. I had a patient, for example, who had a problem with his mother, who replayed the problem with his mother, he was depressed and anxious. He killed himself after the weekend. So when you touch the past, and I'm not even talking about past lives, yet I've made them regressions. Even if you heal something, really, but it only transfers to another level, always. Because there is the causal body, I remind you, who locks you in. We are locked in a permanent feedback loop that causes us to reincarnate constantly, because we do not have access to the truth. Because when you get out of the body, you're happy, you see that you're alive, and you're stopped by the puppets. We are stopped by representations of our beliefs, of course, the things with which we are connected. The family, parents, children, and by adhering to a religion or a movement, and you are cooked. You're done, there's no way to escape any of them. It is in this sense that indeed, as the years go by, the more I repeat, spirituality and consciousness are scams and total diseases, because you have no way out of prison by studying prison. It's as simple as that. While all psychological therapies, psychoenergetic psychotherapy, make you believe exactly the opposite. Make you think that if you know prison, you'll get out of prison. But it's pathetic. Sister. And the only cure. What? Sister. The only way out of this prison is not to think you can get to. Accepting already that there is no prison. Sister. Okay. And that you don't exist, that you're just an assemblage. Sister. And when you think of the past, then when you think of, you reactivate it instantly. Sister. Yes, but how do we do it? When we think about it well, here and now. Sister. Okay. Here and now. Instantly move back into the present instant. Sister. Okay. Don't let it get to you anymore, but don't oppose it. Most people, of course, are opposed and suffer. That's why they're going to see psychos, energeticians, and everything. But if you stay in acceptance today, that is, if you see a thought coming but you don't care about it, you let it emerge, it can only disappear. If a thought does not disappear or is iterative, it is because you have grasped it. That's all. That's all. There are no other alternatives. And the real freedom, of course, is that you observe that you are no longer subject to all this. You can see that your past never comes back. That doesn't stop you from projecting into the future, for what you have to do, but you can no longer be affected. And you can only notice, as the months and years go by, that you are inseparable from the present instant. That is to say, you cannot project yourself into tomorrow, you cannot spontaneously have memories that come back from your childhood, from your past. You are totally immersed in the present, that's the truth. And the difference is that the one who is not in the present, he will constantly have iterative thoughts of his past or projections for the future. He does not live in the present. But today you cannot be free, today, without being in the present. There is no need to hammer yourself in the head, you can't fight your past, you can only accept it. Grace is acceptance, the state of grace. There are only two possibilities: action, reaction or thanksgiving. It's your choice. Sister, with a thought, which could be called obsessive, you do the same thing. How is it that a thought, it has an obsessive character compared to another thought that would tend to pass? That's because you value them. Sister, that's right. Quite simply. You think that's true. Sister, yes. That's right. Of course, as long as you remain a person in the linearity of time, you are, of course, and rightly, convinced that this is true. Sister, yes. But it is an aberration in the way it works. It's even related to the structure of the brain. Sister, and then in fact, the thought and then the emotion, they work together, in fact they are. All the organs of the body are connected by the limbal system, the emotional brain, by the lateral areas of the neck, which use them with fluorines there, for example. The brain constantly sends frequencies into the body. And when the organ does not respond, it puts it in exclusion, the organ returns to degeneration and cancer. This is exactly what Him had demonstrated. We also see it in the symbolism of the human body, since we know that each organ is linked to an archetypal psycho. Well, and depending on where this organ is located, it refers us to this chakra and it refers us to this archetypal psycho. You have a cyst of the right ovary, which is functional or organic, you have a conflict with the father. You have right colitis, you have a conflict with the father. You have left colitis, you have a conflict with the mother. You have a problem on both ovaries, you have a hereditary or transgenerational problem. You have a problem only on the left ovary, you have a problem with the mother. There are formal correspondences between all the zones of the body, the archetypes. If you have Anik D. Susnel's masterful work, From the Tree of Life to the Body Diagram, which retraces in all traditions what the organs are, what the archetypal functions of the organs are that we have completely lost sight of, that are perfectly described in Chinese medicine. But know that, officially, the brain controls the body through this frequency voice. And the brain says, for example, such and such an hour. It is also the meridian hours when the organs in Chinese medicine, at such and such an hour the brain says, hello, the liver. He sends a frequency and the liver must send him the same frequency. It proves that everything is okay. If the liver does not respond to the frequency, the brain excludes it. And it is the exclusion by the brain of a function of an organ or an area of the body that creates degeneration. Brother, why the organ? What? Brother, why didn't the organ respond? He didn't answer because he's touched by your own psyche. Anxiety damages the liver, choice problems damage the gallbladder, time management problems damage the bladder. This is well known in Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine and in traditional medicine systems. The function of organs, before being a purely physiological, organic, metabolic function, is a psychological function. The Chinese have demonstrated this perfectly. Of course, this knowledge has been lost or obscured. But it is all the more obvious that today we know that it works that way. And if your limbal system, which is the transmission of emotions from regulatory frequencies at the body level between frequencies ranging from 40 kHz to 680 and a few kHz, each organ has a resonant frequency. And if the organ no longer responds, there is a process of degeneration. That, moreover, has been perfectly clarified in neuroscience, on the techniques of energetic visualizations, whether it is the Klein effect, or for example, the sensitive crystallizations of Steiner. These are works that we did 30 years ago, 35 years ago, which have since been validated by neuroscience, and which allow us to understand that the individual is a vast assembly of scams, that's all. This is what you submit to by being convinced and in good faith that you are that. Sister Castaneda, at the end of her life, was talking about this kind of. They worked on the astral. Sister: yes. In fact, they described the astral. I explained that when I maintain consciousness at the edge of being and non-being, I see all these worlds. I see globes, around me, stacked one inside the other with the famous symbols they described. The only difference is that I'm not attracted to it. They were, so they did not like the absolute. They left for psychedelic experiences that are the astral, nothing more, nothing less. Only the one who remains motionless in the center and merges into the absolute, discovers the truth. There too, they were swept away by the images. These are not real television images or advertising panels, but astral images. While being convinced that he had lived the truth. And this is what some theogons do that are used a lot today. I think of a particular case in ayahuasca and iboga that only take you into the astral. Unlike salvia, for example, or DMT, which makes you live the truth, that is, the absolute. So, all Westerners have gone to the depths of the ayahuasca and iboga courses that only send people into the astral. They are very sick afterwards. In addition, the shamanic ceremonies. We were lucky to have a friend who knew this environment very well, who had made several sessions on ayahuasca in Central America and who noticed one thing, as he was clairvoyant, it is that every time a shaman performs a ceremony of ayahuasca, you leave with an ice etching stuck behind you. Systematically, as in the awakening of the Kundalini. The awakening of the Kundalini, which occurs spontaneously, without having received the light before, systematically makes you possessed by an etching who sticks to your back and never lets go. Psychics see it. And the shamans of Central America, most of them are only in business and in the will of evil, no matter what they tell you. That is how people are being abused at all levels. There is no solution in there, on the contrary. Sister: as you say, my children are small, yes. Sister: more and more, I have the feeling that I no longer have a choice. Kindly, there is no more choice or way out of the character, all the doors close one after the other. Of course. Sister: and that there is no more, there will gently be no other possibility than that of jumping. That's right. Sister: but you understand for the character from a point of view, how to say, linear and first degree, there is something desperate, if you will. It's hopeless. Sister: there is really something of the order of despair in this. Yes. But that is the objective of what is called the New World Order. They continue on the line that was drawn 200 years ago. The abolition of cash, the implantation of microchips, is a reality. It is not 10 years from now. Facial recognition, cameras everywhere, the impossibility of having an anonymous movement, that's exactly what they're doing. Sister. Yes. Let us not fool ourselves. Sister. Anything you can do from a point of view, as it is not yet recorded, you see, the reversal is not yet recorded, the character acts in a homeopathic way. We created a school to take our children out of public school, yes. Sister. And then our children are in an alternative school. But if you want, I have the feeling that it's homeopathic, but that the jump it must be radical, absolute. When I think to myself, I'm going to do the best I can for my children, I'm like confronted with the fact that the thing I have to do, it's, finally, how to say, every time I want to act on something outside, it comes back to me. That's normal. Sister. It comes back to me as it always does. Everything you oppose, even at the societal level, will come back to you in full force. Sister. Yes. And it's going to be more and more true. This is what we call a dictatorship. It's full dictatorship. You no longer have the right to think freely. There was no need for weapons, before there were weapons, now they have the programming of the MK Ultra applied to the masses. Besides, it has a name, it's studied, it's called social ponerology or social engineering, how to bring crowds where you want. Simone Weil herself wrote it. She said she was astounded by the ability of the co-created laws to change human behavior. It's so simple. This is what they have done with children in relation to the laws recently passed on pedophilia. That the onus is on the child to prove that he or she did not consent. There you go. So, but all this has been passed into law. However, this passage in the laws, whether you oppose it or not, does not change anything, because in any case it will be recorded and accepted by all humanity without its full knowledge. That's it, that's mental programming, it's as simple as that. You get your guy's face, you vote for him. You get passed laws, even if you refuse them, they don't give a shit. Even people who are in spirituality on the contrary, all those who are in spirituality, when they hear about warriors of light who will fight them, their plan, but they laugh softly. No one can defeat the Luciferic intelligence. Only the intelligence of the light is impersonal and can do so, provided that we the relay. Otherwise, everything of a personal nature, combat, light, all that is astral, it only reinforces them. And by the way, that's what's happening. On the one hand, you have the brothers and sisters who have come out of confinement, who are released, there are millions of us, and on the other hand, you have all the spiritual people who dream, who only feed them. When you talk about Notre Dame de Paris, which burned down during the week of the Feast of Mary, in addition to the Celtic level, everyone knows that it was voluntary. Everyone knows that it was created voluntarily. It is a physical and occult act, commercial also because they will create a shopping center, but everyone knows it. What difference does it make? Nothing. Pedophilia now, everyone knows that it is in all areas and especially in religious areas and not only in Catholic ones. All power leads to that. What drives humanity is power. As soon as you take power over anything, over anyone, you cause the second chakra to be reactivated. Where all the lines of predation were, all the need to enslave, to control, to dominate the other. So we're going to present this to you in companies, coaches, psychologists, as well as self-esteem, motivation, self-confidence. But they are total perversions, because they take you directly to the scaffold. That is, as soon as you have tasted power, you have awakened the second chakra, as soon as you have worked on self-confidence, you open the door to all possible hells. And there's nothing you can do about it. And you're convinced it's you. You can't know the manipulation, it goes much further than anything that is currently on display for the general public, since the very foundations are neuroscientific and unknown. So ask around, look at social engineering, social ponerology. You have books that tell you how to handle crowds and we know how to do it perfectly. And when you bring a crowd into something horrible, you can't do anything. No matter how much you warn others, you are preventing them from going in circles. There you go. And all humanity, since the dawn of time, has been operating like that. There you go. And even through the revelations that are being made at the moment, the understandings that are being made at the moment, of course you are personally going through the same shock. First you say it's not possible, denial, then anger, then negotiation and never acceptance. So acceptance even at this level is fundamental. Because it is acceptance that creates forgiveness and grace, and puts the intelligence of light into action. As long as you believe that you will get out of this by forming associations, by considering yourself a warrior of light, you condemn yourself. And you serve the system. You're anti-system and you feed the system. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. They are winners every time. The revolutionary, they love it, because he's going to feed them. Any force of confrontation or opposition feeds the system and you cannot escape it. The only way to no longer be subject to the system is to see the truth of what is happening and to be at the limit, to be what is called a marginal. Without it you are completely trapped by the system, whether you have money or not. It doesn't change anything. And it will be a problem, as I was saying, that will appear on the screen of consciousness, more and more human beings. Then, once you are informed, you're free. Either you prefer freedom or you prefer security. Either you get implanted, if we go that far, or you'll be eliminated in camps. But there are no other alternatives. Fortunately, there is the collective event, the solar flash, since there is no follow-up afterwards. Without it they kept on going and it kept going on by themselves, they don't need to make any effort. They don't make any effort. So, let those who seek the light, they do not stop making efforts. That's it, what we call human society, that's it, nothing more, nothing less. What Krishnamurti was already saying when he said, it is not a sign of good health to feel good in this society. And today, it's a terrifying news story. There is no space of freedom, no space of autonomy, in what is called Western society. That's impossible. And now with the active phase of repression of the New World Order, that is, the limitation of all freedoms, you see this not only in France but in all countries. And there is nothing you can do, that is, if you oppose them, you will feed them, you remain in duality, it is so obvious. Besides, it's written in social engineering manuals, they use that. The only ones who are dangerous are those who tell the truth, good Julian sang. They locked me up but they wanted to lock me up but all the channels in France, there are others, they leave them alone, they only talk bullshit. They have never been worried, they will never be worried, inevitably, they bring people to the tracks that go in their direction. If you want to work on yourself, today I would answer you that it is a total heresy. If only because of the environment that already keeps you under its matrix. And besides, you yourself are getting started. It means that you recognize that when you do work on yourself, as they say, you recognize that you are a person, at no time do you access the transpersonal truth. And when you want to program cellular memories, when you want to get rid of a disease, through energy or the psychic, as I said, you're just maintaining the system. We have reached such a point that people will do everything to stay alive rather than accept death. They're all willing to pay for immortality. You can't be free like that, it's impossible. Whatever your dose of love and good heart, you only put on weight all the time. Today, I am more than formal, working on myself, on the psychological and energetic aspect, without seeking to expand consciousness as we did with Esther's dimensions, is a heresy. And all the people who are in this business take you on paths of perdition without exception. There is no other solution than the present instant. Sister. They do it in good faith, we can thank all these therapists, they do it in good faith. They are convinced they are doing something. But of course, they are in good faith. Yes, they are acting in good faith. But good faith does not protect against danger. Sister. No, but to hear you, there is only here and now. Yes, we're in the middle of Luciferianism, if you will, which no longer has anything to do with the poor Lucifer, but that is what we have called Lucifer's forces. And of course all the forces of the New Age are Luciferic in essence. Look what he had said about the gentleman who was at the AYOUN, I don't remember his name, David Spangler, he had said, no one will be able to enter the New Age without going through the Luciferic initiation. But what do all the people who are in spirituality today do through therapies that propose on memories and other than feeding lucidity? That's all they do. Sister, they don't realize, there really is one, how can I say, I see a form of innocence in it, so, you see, they really don't realize. No, they don't realize, because they don't know the ins and outs. Sister, that's right. Because they have not gone behind the appearance of energy, or behind the appearance of psychology, because they do not know the neuroscientific laws, they do not know social ponerology. Sister, that's right. But this is also part of, I think, the people who set up the confinement. Finally, at university I remember one, in the history of religions of our professor who explained the link between science, anthropology, the first fathers of the church who went to Latin America and Nazism. It was masterful, if you will. Well yes, I followed the same. Sister. It was vertiginous. Then what I didn't understand was that, after the classes I went to see him and I told him. But why it's not taught in a much broader way, why it must remain. It's forbidden. Sister. In the university cycle. Well, I told him, we're no dumber than you, and then he looked at me like that. But if you want, I told him very spontaneously, really very naively, and then I said to myself, well, shit, university is also made so that knowledge remain in the hands, elite people. Sister. Here, a small part of the people, it's not a question of intelligence or ability to receive information, it's really the idea of keeping people in a form of ignorance. Yes, especially since I remind you that we are mammals in this body and that mammals obey a fundamental principle which is also called the Lucifer principle. It is the strongest, for humans, not the strongest physically, but the richest who fucks first, who eats first and who decides. In all mammals, that's the way it is. It's the same with wolves. Except that the pack leader who is the strongest, who eats first, who makes love first, who wants and lets the pack, serves the pack. So, while humans, in the Lucifer principle, take ascendancy, they take power, they destroy the other. That's how we work. It's called the Lucifer principle. The one with the most money has the power. It's not even the ego, it's power. Power is a catastrophic element, because power locks you up as soon as there is an ascendancy over someone or by a profession, by a personal will to have power over someone, you open the doors of your own hell. You open the doors to predation, you open the doors to pedophilia, greed, ego, of course, too, and people don't see it. Buddhism, for example, I gave you an example, you have very good people who do retreats among Buddhists who are convinced that Buddhism is something very good. But me, all the Buddhist monks I met, prestigious ones, we brought them to therapy in the office, they all had the second chakra exploded. I've never seen any Buddhists with the open heart chakra, yet they talk about compassion all the time. Never. And all these great Buddhist officials, the second chakra, it is exploded. He works all with the AYOUN, meditation only on power. It puts into perspective everything we can believe about Buddhism. Brother, in fact, basically, I found that there was a lack of joy in Buddhism. It never attracted me because of that. You have many religious, among the Catholics, among the imams, or the rabbis. Do you see any joy? That's impossible. And that's normal. That's normal. As soon as you are put in a position of power, teacher or anything else, whether you like it or not, your second chakra is exploded. The only solution is to open the heart. Without it you remain in power and are subjected to all the impulses related to predation lines. And the most luciferic predation, of course, is pedophilia. There is no other one. Long before money or greed, and it always ends like that. So, realize in Buddhism you are constantly being talked about compassion, and when I see these high-level teachers, it is the High Master of Tibetan Buddhism in Lertug, they are all in power. Not one of them has an open heart chakra. There is no such thing. So we are deceived but constantly by ourselves already. Brother, yes, be careful, we must be vigilant. But this lucidity, it only appears when you are already informed. As we see the academics trying to hide the results, of course. So that there are books coming out every day, I tell you, you go on the internet, you type social ponerology or social engineering, you will understand right away. Governing a country means implementing social engineering today to ensure that the people always go in the direction we want. It's as simple as that. There you go. And people, in addition, will give their consent. What I explained at the time of the Macron vote, people gave their consent. Even if you were deceived about the sale of the merchandise, the fact that you gave your ballot, without your knowledge even of your own free will. In the law, you weren't led to, you chose. But the choice is not free. And he can't be free. And that's the way it is in all circumstances of life. And the human being is self-conditioning, self-programming, by the mass, and after a while can no longer see clearly. You will even see in relation to pedophilia, when some names come up, people will be in total denial. It's so big to accept that from the person's location, people won't accept it. Only those who dream of a new world or those who are freer enjoy. And it is something that we see more and more clearly, not only in France but in all countries. If you want, for example, I went to Quebec. For me, the real French are the Corps, not the French. They have kept the authenticity that was found in the countryside 40, 50 years ago, which no longer exists. As they have not yet been infiltrated by social programming, they have spaces of freedom that are unknown to us. First of all, financial freedom. Because we, in Europe anyway, do everything we can to ensure that you are in survival mode. Whatever you earn, it gets worse and worse. Before was only, we are going to call, the small salaries, but now even the average salaries are being swept away by the obligations to pay, and no longer have a minute to think about what they are. It's deliberate. Entertainment, sports, it's all about purpose. Because it distracts you. You may love football, sport and tennis as much as you want, but you have to be aware that when you watch this, beyond pleasing yourself, you feed the matrix. Now, I recall that Christ had said, 1. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it. 2. No one can serve two masters at the same time. It's up to you. And at some point, you can no longer compose. So, either you put a bullet in your head, or you become a hermit, or you get out of the system. That's what I was explaining to Isabel as a teacher. At one point, you can't compose anymore. When you see clearly, what do you want to do? Either you stay in the system and are safe or you are free. Security is the word in the wooden tongue that is used to deprive people of their freedom. They don't need cannons or guns. That's it, that's old-fashioned. It's old-fashioned. We program you through communication. Although people, at this level are less and less fooled. But they don't give a shit, because even if you oppose them, well, for example, a journalist writes the truth. I came to France for Rougier's case, it doesn't change anything, he was cleared through customs by the investigations, supposedly. And come on, move along, there's nothing to see. And even if you oppose them, you only reinforce them. If you oppose yourself, you strengthen what you oppose or want to see disappear. It's a vicious circle, but perfect. Perfect and total. On which, indeed, there is no means of action, and moreover it would be useless, it would only strengthen it once again by finding its freedom. And to live freedom is to be free of one's person. Without it, you can only be unwittingly subjected to societal mechanisms, to mass mechanisms, because we are mammals. Sister. To get out of the system, there are many people in it. I will talk about myself. I want to get out of this system, out of work, out of the insurance of something. But I'm all alone and it scares me. What? Of course it's scary. But that's what it's for. You'll always be afraid. Until you take the plunge. Live it first. That's it. And then, as many brothers and sisters have testified in the satsangs, who have indeed gone through these stages of fear, especially when you're alone, and who realize afterwards, their lives become a happiness. The washing machine is broken, they have no money for it, to buy a machine, we bring them a machine. That's the way life works. When you don't fight anymore. But you have to accept it already. Of course, you can't afford what you want when you want. You are dependent on life, But if you accept it, you're perfectly fine. You will never lack for anything. And all the brothers and sisters who are living it today, because there are many of them, either because they've been forced to do so by life's circumstances or because they have made a choice. But in both cases, they all testify to the same thing, which is that they are free. You know, I can talk about it. I was a doctor, the biggest firm in Paris. I was rolling in gold. I lived in a castle. I was driving a sports car, and overnight I decided to stop because I saw the system strangling me. The first 2 years, indeed, you feel weird. And then you realize that you've taken away a huge but colossal weight from yourself that you didn't even see. Sister, yes, but you had enough money to buy something and retire. Ah no. I had nothing left. In 2012, when they took everything from me, I had nothing. Ah yes. What are we doing, people? They made requests for donations for me. They have created donations. And that's when it made me laugh. With the company AYOUN Transcriptions, I paid myself a salary of €1,000 per month, whereas before used to earn 15 times, 20 times that every month. And when I was arrested, they grabbed everything, nothing. I had no reservations, I had nothing of my own. They called for donations from all over the world and I received fortunes. Life always provides the living with what is necessary. It's always ego fears, it's always linked to conditioning, always. But I guarantee you, there's no picture. Not for anything in the world today, I would accept to have what I had before. Especially not. Everything you own, owns you. That's so true. It is valid for a child, it is valid for a house, it is valid for a car, it is valid for everything. And so, after 2 years, I had to realize that no matter what I thought in my head, I could only realize that I was much more alive than with my money, my luxury cars and my medical practice from all over Europe. And for nothing in the world I would deprive myself of that freedom. I would rather not eat, not sleep under a roof or in a house than fall back into this system. It's obvious, I can't deny it. There is no photo, as they say. And I saw the transformations in my life as I went along, of my body, of certain hereditary diseases that were there, that literally disappeared, with evidence on genetic testing. But, because the intelligence of the light did this, that is, I was forced to stop working in medicine because I had a neuroscience society and then AD was created. And then AD was stopped. And that's when I realized that freedom has no price. I told you, I repeat, this experience of liberty is much more important than having a roof over your head or money for tomorrow. Because no security can bring you this freedom, on the contrary, on the contrary, on the contrary. It's a decoy. Everything that is possession, effectively and concretely locks you in. You are possessed by your possessions. When you don't have anything, what do you want us to take from you? You are free. You have a free mind, a free conscience, and your person is free too. And at that moment, you're obliged to be in the fluidity of unity, in the, what is called the maximum neurobiological efficiency. You let things come to you. Rather than wanting to grab it from you, rather than wanting to be afraid for tomorrow, how I'm going to eat, how I'm going to live and everything. But it requires an abandonment, what is called total sacrifice. But soon, you won't be able to deal with that anymore because, for the moment, people didn't see it, but today, even if they don't dare to admit it, they live it more and more clearly. But I haven't had any social security since 2012 and I don't care. In fact, I have never seen a doctor in my life or done a complimentary examination. Except when I wanted to do the genetic tests to prove the disappearance of a genetic disease. But there's no reason for you to be sick. But I haven't been sick since I stopped being in the system. Everything. Sister, we can't compare you to everyone else. Her. Sister, you are not everyone. Ah, but I am, yes. Yes, yes. Yes, yes. And the people, the brothers and sisters who live it, are also Mr. Everyone and they live it. And they all see the same thing. Brother. But very little, it is that few make the decision. But everyone can make the decision. But it's up to you to know. I told you and I repeat, soon you will no longer be able to deal with this. Brother. But Jean-Luc is not the only one who made the decision. No. There are millions of us. Brother. To surrender to life. Sister. No, of course not. I'm not talking about me. I'm also talking about all the examples of brothers and sisters who come here or elsewhere and who feel the same way. Brother. We have a Spanish friend, for example, who was an artist, who made a lot of money. Well, following traumatic events in her life, she lives with €400 a month, and she lives very well. She lives very well. Brother. Well, I have a girlfriend. There you go. That freedom, for me, is priceless. None. The benefit/cost ratio, there is no photo. For health, for your freedom, for the way you work, that's coming out of the matrix. Brother. Anyway, Jesus, he said it. Seek first the kingdom and everything else. And it is a matter of autonomy, of personal responsibility. There are no arguments to support that. Except, indeed, for the arguments of fear. Sister. Yes, it is fear. But fear is part of the sheep spirit, simply called mammals. This fear is a direct result. All fears, without exception, come only from the fear of death. So no matter how you say it, I'm not afraid of death, it's not true. If there is any fear, it is that somewhere there is a fear of death. That's all. That's all. Someone who has experienced an NDE, even astral, simply, he is no longer afraid of death. As long as you do not have proof that you exist outside this body and this life, even if you know it, even if you have had experiences, you cannot be free. Because you are linked to this myth of immortality, as I explained many times, there are the reflexes of the reptilian brain itself, which puts you in a cognitive slavery to say to yourself, be careful, you will lack money, be careful. But it's not you. It's the engrams of your reptilian brain that do that. You, as a human being, do not know fear. Fear is induced by the system and by all programming. When we say to become like a child again, that's reality. Sister. But you see. At all levels. Sister. All this, we get guilty afterwards. Of course. Of course. Everything is done, anyway, to make you feel guilty. It is the human being who is guilty. Global warming is about people. You get shit from you, it's your fault. You didn't plan, you didn't organize. Sister. And even by, I'm scared and I'm not going to make it, so I know I have to, you know. There's the thing that's not even thoughts. You see, in neuroscience, they're called behavioral injunctions from your reptilian brain. That you accept as your own thoughts, against which, of course, you'll seek a solution, and you observe, whatever, that it is strengthened. Sister. Yes. I'm telling you, the mechanics are perverse but perfectly oiled. It works perfectly. And there is no need for effort, there is no need for weapons, there is no need for warfare. Today totally muzzled people. That's what they do. Sister. So the trick is to see all this happen. To return to point zero. Well, there's no other choice. That's what I was saying. Forced, humanity will be forced to go through the eye of the needle, the so-called stasis, the event, because there are no other solutions. Remember what the other one said in Matrix to Neo, remember that they will do everything to save their own prison. They do everything to preserve their enslavement. That is exactly what we are witnessing. Serfdom is voluntary. From Ekron, it's the same. You have been deceived by the images, you have still cast your ballot, you're under the influence of Luciferism, whether you like it or not. Under the pretext of avoiding the brown plague or the extreme right, you have given your approval to the installation of the New World Order in France. I explained it in 2016 and 2017, it was so evident. Sister. Yes, you didn't have to vote. So of course, it's completely perverse, because you signed a contract without being aware of the lines. Some lines. You know, the little lines in little ones. But it is your responsibility, especially today, with the internet, to get informed. No one can do it for you. And today, we are all confronted with this choice. With more or less intensity. And that's normal. How do you show that you have sacrificed your pseudo-individuality to truth, to love? You cannot be in love and feed the system. That's impossible. And all those who claim otherwise, have not yet been confronted with this truth. But this truth, it is total. That's exactly Matrix. People will do everything, right up to the last moment, to defend their own prisons. Brother, actually, yes, but what is not, what is important is to be free. To decide freedom. Yes, of course. And to sacrifice his comfort, possibly if necessary, whatever. But on the other hand, the fact of buying a product well, the important thing is to find your freedom, it is not to feed or not the system. Establish yourself in self-sufficiency. Yes, yes. Brother, this is the programmed world destination, therefore. For example. Let's take an example, toothpaste. All toothpastes, even organic ones, contain titanium oxide, which are nanoparticles. Brother, okay. Alright. So even in organic farming, you are contaminated. For example, in organic farming, soybeans have been introduced. By presenting soy to you as a truly extraordinary alternative product. That is so not true. There is no worse way to describe organic food than soya. Because soya is the only plant that grows to the ground. It is not nothing that they've developed soya from everywhere and, in addition, transgenic. Even in bread. Your French want you buy, there's soya now. It is not for a tasty interest or a chemical or texture quality. It's just to get soy all over you. Because soya brings you back to the earth. You will suppress the facts, because the facts were what made it possible to make the cell work and open the consciousness. Everything is perfectly orchestrated. Sister, yes, that's what's terrible. They don't even have to think about it. It is done automatically. From the moment you think perverse, all the things that will happen will be perverse. It's as simple as that. It fits together on its own. Sugar, the sugar industry. Sweet drinks, sodas. They don't need to think, to say, we're going this, that. Brother, it happens by itself. It's done by itself. That is, anything that comes out of a twisted mind will be twisted. He doesn't need to think about it. It is the Luciferic intelligence, which functions according to the same principles as the intelligence of the light. Except, there are some who bring you back to matter and others who bring you back to truth. But it's the same type of energy. One of them is pointing upwards and the other downwards. Down is suffering, up is love. And in neuroscience, I have repeated it to you several times during these 3 days, there is very little difference between suffering and love. Since the worst of suffering, look at Christine Singer, we were talking about it last night, brings you back to love. So, this whole scenario was written, but then, when you see it, you can only laugh about it. Not only have you come out of the matrix, but you see the game of creation in all its horror, of separation. And once again, if confinement did not take on such an acuity, which organizes itself. From the moment you submit yourself, with a ballot paper, with anything, you are taken away. Autonomy is not an empty word. Are you autonomous? When I talk about autonomy, it is not necessarily to live in a cave, away from society, but to live on the periphery of that society. Are you autonomous there? Whether it is with social assistance, with what exists in France, by family, by friends, whatever. But at some point, and this is the case for more and more brothers and sisters, who are starting to open up or who are open, you will no longer be able to deal with the system. That's impossible. And you will feel pain, anger that will rise. This is called the anger of the 4 phases of the shock, this time both individual and collective. Even before the event, which will give you the opportunity to reposition yourself. Either you accept suffering or you are free. It's something that happens every day on everyone's screen. As Krishnamurti said, the problem is society, not man. Sister, what is striking is that, it is so much, the lie is, if you want, what strikes me is that for several years, they have not even gone to so much trouble to make pretty lies. They don't even bother anymore, how can I put it? Brother, it is no longer necessary. Sister, Yes, it's not even, I mean. The horror is poured out like that permanently and then it doesn't shock anyone. So, according to you, are they stupid? No, they do it voluntarily because they've moved into the final phase of confrontation, that is, chaos, order through disorder. The war of civilizations. Between the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews who organized all this. But that's what they want, that's what they're looking for. Sister, that's rude. But in France, it's that they look first. They are looking for total confrontation. And they enjoy it, because they see that with all the taxes, all the things that do, to pry people's eyes out and everything, it goes on happily. But for them, it is a senseless pleasure. Brother. No, but. Yes, but as Kelch says, no one has to buy bullshit. Sister. Yes, but what strikes me is our kind of apathy, this kind of, I don't know how to say, we're amorphous, you know. Brother. Yes, but that's all right, the important thing is you. Sister. Yes. Brother. What you do. Well, yes. Brother. That's what's important. Sister. Yes. But the mass, it will not change. Until the last moment of the collective event. Let us not fool ourselves. When I say, there are millions of us living this freedom, but it won't go up to hundreds of millions. Most of humanity will live the event without knowing anything about it. And so much the better. Sister. Yes. And so much the better, because if they knew about it from their person, they would come into conflict, angry and feed the opposing forces. In quotation marks, opponents. And it's justice. Even they reckons, these jokers are us too. Sister. Yes, that's right. That's us. That's what's inside of us. So, other than on the societal state and the state of the world. Brother. Actually, you talked about the step with the mushrooms. And then you mentioned krill oil. Yes. Brother. Does that mean it's after? After that? It's better if you're really fixed. Because at that point, the krill will be absorbed much better. Brother. Of course. All right. Krill, on the other hand, does not last all the time. Unlike mushrooms. From what I observed, for example, it shows on skin dryness, it lasts a year and a half, 2 years. After that, you have to go back to a little cure. Brother. Okay. Is there anyone who knows the site? Sister. There is a lab plus, there is a lab where you take them who? No lab, but you need the NKO patent, it's the patent of the krill oil manufacturing process. And another patent that came out that looks better than NKO, but it's called Boost I don't know what, well, I forgot the name. But krill oil has the particularity of oxidizing. If the capsule is not waterproof, in quotation marks, sealed, it will really smell like a rotten egg. And of course, the fats inside, not oxidized, will start to oxidize and then it will become harmful. That's why it's better to focus on it. But it doesn't cost much per krill. Whatever the labs are, it's between 20 and 23 euros for 1 month of treatment. It's not the same price as mushrooms, extracts, sister, and it has to come from Antarctica. Yes, well, in general, that's where there's the most krill. The boats that collect krill. So at the time, there were comments from people saying, leave the krill alone, stop eating the animals. This is completely stupid. I remind you that humankind represents 0.1% of the world's biomass and krill alone represents 10% of the biomass. It's gigantic. Gigantic. 10% of all living biological material on Earth is krill. And whales, they eat 5 tons a day, a whale. Brother. I think they're taking a little too much. What? Brother. No, I say. We could tell the whales to eat a little less. A little less. But, if you want, with these products. It's not to sell you products, I don't have any shares in the labs, I don't give a shit. But, this is the first time, with everything that has been sold in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, as a scam between shark cartilage and all these things, that they're really products, really useful. Which are not really wind and which have both structural aspects, for krill and iridium, absolutely phenomenal. There is not a person who has not taken these products who has not noticed changes. That's impossible. I tell you, joint flexibility, skin quality, mental balance, it's phenomenal. Phenomenal. Brother, arthrosis. What? Brother, osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis, yes. It's fine too. Krill will put oil in your joints even if you have osteoarthritis. You regain absolutely incredible joint flexibility. Sister, you can remember what you said about the water you can put under the bed. Oh, yes. Water is the essential vibratory structure of life. Not just here, by the way. We are talking about the waters from above and the waters from below. Water, when you buy it in a supermarket, even the water from FIGUERES, which is good water. 1. It's in a plastic bottle. Secondly, it is polluted by the lights, the people passing by, it takes all the information there is around the place where it is stored. And you're going to drink good water that carries degraded information. Especially since the purer the water, the more capable and likely it is to retain information. So we take water, which is called high resistivity, that is, where there are very few minerals in solution. FIGUERES, Volvic, Restylane in France mainly, and then we drink this. But also drink all the information from what she's been through. The only way to really and concretely neutralize it is also from the experiments we conducted 40 years ago now. We realized that if you store water, away from light, even in plastic, under your bed, the energy quality of the water is totally transformed. That is, you have eliminated all the subtle energy pollutants that are, unfortunately, linked to the excellent water quality, and you're replacing it with your own information field of your living space and yourself. Since it's under your bed. And at that moment, this water has absolutely phenomenal energizing properties. Sister, okay. You need to have a relatively healthy place to live. You say, it will pick up your energy field, but if, for example, you are not well, what will it pick up from you? What do you need? Yes, of course. Because there are phenomena that we know very well in what we call therapeutic bioresonance or magnetic fields that we use in different machines. We know, for example, about equipment that was used in Luxembourg, Germany and Switzerland in particular. In France, you use it, you go to prison. I have doctor friends who bought this machine, they were removed from the order while in Germany it is used every day. In England, sister, bioresonance. Bioresonance, yes. You have, in American hospitals, Not all allergic people are treated with antihistamines, they are all treated with frequencies. Because it works every time. In France, it is forbidden. So this therapeutic bioresonance consists in taking the human being's magnetic field, filtering it, in quotation marks, good, with different techniques, but returning this inverted electromagnetic field. If you are sent back your own inverted electromagnetic field, you have a balancing effect. This is what happens when you store water under your bed, away from the light. It will, of course, take care of your energy information, but as there are very few minerals in solution, when you drink it, it will give you a mirror image that will make some processes disappear. Sister, that I can do for my children, for myself, finally. Yes, absolutely. But once again, all this is very good to do it, of course, we see the effects and everything, but the most important thing is that we are still subject to this collective, societal, energetic and the bath. And this one, there's no way out of it. That is, as long as you adopt techniques like that, without living your inner evolution, it is on a wooden leg. Sister, I know that. That I know. For example, if you take water, you store it like we said. So we, at the time, had equipment to inform the water. We were working on reverse osmosis plants. Moreover, my partner at the time was the first to have imported reverse osmosis plants into Europe from the United States. And he began, of course, to drink clean water, that is, really energized and purified. Well, always the same, it's like when you're vegetarians. After a month he became extremely sensitive. At first, you're happy, you feel everything. And then he got sick. which means that if you adopt the techniques I tell you today without changing yourself, you will destroy yourself as perfectly as with tap water. There are enough people who have become vegetarians, there are enough people and friends who have used pure water for nutrition, even to brush their teeth, wash vegetables and everything. They have become sick because they remain the person. So, wanting to improve with the same techniques I'm talking about, then, obviously AYOUN is different, it's structural. But, nevertheless, if you adopt energy techniques, for example, for water, well, you are condemning yourself. You're going to become so sensitive. So at first, you will lighten up, you will feel more energy, but every time you get sick. If you remain a person. Sister, I understood that, at last, I have no illusions. I know that I will not release myself by eating mushrooms or drinking energized water. That's, I understand. Yes, I understood correctly. But what I mean by that is that you lock it up. You reinforce the confinement. In the long run. Sister, yes. Oh, yes. Sister, I understood that it was actually that. Well, maybe I was wrong. But I think I heard you say that you were proposing some kind of thing to help the process, that it would be more pleasant to make the transition or to experience what there was to experience now. By not being sick all over the body, you know. Yes, of course. Sister, that's it, actually that's just it. Indeed, it helps to raise the vibratory level. In other words, to expand consciousness, which is already to remain in personal consciousness, we agree. But in the long run, this spread consciousness, this self that is lived, there is still an extreme sensitivity that appears. And you're even more disturbed by food gaps, magnetic fields, Wi-Fi. People who are vegetarians or who take great care of themselves, they all become allergic to Wi-Fi. Sister, I thank you for the precision, because that is not what I understood. If I am looking for ways to, how to say it. There, I have pain in my body, I'm tired. But I more or less understood why. By asking only yesterday, it becomes clearer for me. Then what does it come from? Well, from resistance. This is a step that should not be left behind. That is to say, the vibratory rise, the expansion of consciousness made it possible to escape certain types of anomalies. But the expansion of consciousness, when it becomes too important, becomes spiritual pride. So, there is a right measure, it's always the same. Getting out of something through the vibratory rise is already excellent, but that's not all. If you leave it at that, you're as trapped as if you were still a strict person. Sister, I am not interested in the expansion of consciousness, really not. I'd rather be flush with the daisies, you know. I've had enough of this. When I talk about expansion of consciousness, it has nothing to do with a rise in the astral or people who are completely without flesh. Sister, yes. I understand that. The expansion of consciousness, it happens here on earth, in this body. Sister, yes. Not anywhere else. But what I mean by that is that if you adopt all the techniques to improve your health, your condition, it makes sense. Sister, yes. But without changing internally, it's useless. Sister, yes. It will help you for a while, yes, of course, the time to see clearly if I can say so, but then if you don't do what needs to be done, to decide for yourself, you will only get worse after. Sister, But this is what many people have found who have not given up on their conscience, or who still have fears. Everything is done in a script, in every possible way, to bring you back to the end of the dream. Silence everything you want to improve in your life, what makes sense, to preserve your children, your integrity, and all that, makes sense to some extent. But then in the script, if you're not autonomous, it will make you dive back into everything with extreme sensitivity, to weights, thoughts, energies, which becomes embarrassing. So there is, always the same, a middle ground. And in the script, everything is planned that for whatever you do, if you are not true, you are getting worse and worse. But it is not a punishment, since death is a liberation. Only the ego speaks of death as a cataclysm or that. Look even at the survival reflexes. We try to avoid getting old, we try to maintain health. When someone is sick and dying, people call me and ask me to save him. Oh, but let him go free. What is this mechanism of preserving life when you're at the end of life? It is the collective ego. Even among the spiritual people, that's all we see, the need to preserve ourselves, to protect ourselves, the need to be well. But at some point it becomes pathological. You put more energy, you invest more time, more money, more energy, more consciousness, in changing your person than in being freed from your person. Realize that. And this works every time. As I said, I have seen with countless brothers and sisters who were strict vegetarians who all became ill. But that's normal. The important thing is not what you put in your mouth, even if it is indeed important to have better health, more able to resist what you want. But what is important is what comes out of your mouth, what you think. And as long as you bring everything back to your person, with this notion of the need to protect yourself, you're only locking yourself in. How do you want to be free in this process? This nutritional and energetic approach must be accompanied by an understanding of how the system works, how you work. Whether this understanding is intellectual, and the knowledge I deliver to you about neuroscience, whether it is vibratory by an entity X or Y, but it is you who decide. Silence. That is, even your wishes, even the most human, normal wishes, only bring us back to the system. Brother, yes, that's for sure. There are two matrices, binary matrix, crystal matrix. It has been explained in detail for more than a year. Well, either you're in the binary matrix or you're in the crystal matrix, and it's going to get more and more sharp. Brother, AYOUN. The binary matrix is the societal arrangement at all levels. The crystal matrix is a gaping brotherhood. This is what brothers and sisters who are free live. They are still as I told you, you see them everywhere, smiling. So far, they don't have a money, they don't have a profession, they don't necessarily have a place to live, but they always get by. And nothing can approach this state of freedom. It's up to you to decide. Sister, AYOUN. And don't make a special case because I'm the one who's telling you. I'm telling you, there are millions of us, and that's the truth. I meet them every day, wherever we go. In Spain, Quebec, Morocco, anywhere, we always see the same thing. You can't pretend to escape a system and feed it somewhere, you have to be logical. Sister, AYOUN. It's up to you. And life, the intelligence of life will lead all of us, individually and collectively, to see the reality of it. Drop the system, that's not opposing it. It means eventually dealing with it, but with as little input as possible. But again, if you put security in front, don't complain that you're not free. Brother, of course. Freedom is exactly the opposite of security. Since security requires preservation, and therefore the reptilian brain, a reptilian logic, which has been called life insurance, social insurance, home insurance, car insurance, all this is just predation. A patriarchal society. It bursts, it shows up like a nose in the middle of your face everywhere, you don't have to be free to see it. But what people do not yet see as individuals is that they cannot feed two masters at a time. Of course, there are always excuses. I need a roof, I need to work, I need to eat, I need to move. Yes, no, you need this more than you need to be free. Sister, AYOUN. Brother, of course, that's all. That's all. It's simple, clear and precise. What I am saying here is not a hypothesis, it is not a conception, it is not an ideology. This is the reality of what happens to everyone. We're just observing. What emanates and shines from a brother or sister who does not have a money, who does not have a roof and who is free, is much more important and more loving than the one who has put himself in security, who claims to be open and who is careful to always have in anticipation, you never know, a well-stocked mattress, well-filled bank accounts, material, emotional and professional security. Sister, that's right, I have no. And it's becoming more and more apparent. Even in the encounters, even among the people you meet like that on the street, but in the encounters it's obvious. We can see the difference perfectly, but it is instantaneous, between the one who is free and the one who is formatted. And it shows in the difference in behavior, in the difference in what is emanating. And there is one that emanates joy and the other that emanates fear. Sister. And I am sorry, you can feel it. Sister. That's all right. Her. Sister. That's all right. It is not serious for the one who is free, it is rather embarrassing for the one who emanates this fear. Sister. Yes, but I know I am still a red nose as you say. But it's not. I'd just like you to be more precise in fact when you say, when it's always said, but in fact you don't decide anything, everything is written, you don't decide anything, but you decide, and then when I hear after that you decide. Sister. Or you keep feeding the character. As a person, yes, it is up to you to decide whether or not to be in the matrix. Sister. That's right. But you can't decide to be free. Sister. That's right. Okay. There is an action to be taken, yes. Sister. So it seems at first, the act to be done is done by the character, we agree? Yes. Sister. That's right. That's the sacrifice. What is seen as a sacrifice by the person, and that's why it was a sacrifice, in fact is a blessing. But until you make the sacrifice you can't see it. Sister. And that's why I say it's a personal decision. Sister. But indeed you will have no choice. Because when there is nothing left, when there is no electricity, when there is no food to eat with 80% of the world's crops destroyed this year, what are you doing? Are you going to kill someone to eat? I don't care, I don't need to eat anymore. If there is food I eat, and if I don't think about eating I don't eat, and I am still doing just as well. But it's not something I've been looking for. 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I was shopping, like everyone else, Gina looks laugh, with beeswax candles, ready to light them, the water stock. Sister. I remember. But this is all ridiculous today. Sister. At the time, this was what was proposed. At the time, we had no way of living the truth, so we could only adapt to the character. Sister. Yes. Even with the top chakras open. There was no wave of life that had risen, there was no inner and outer freedom, it was not accessible. But now that it is totally accessible and free, well, you can see the ridiculous nature of what is called life here in this world. We're sick here. Conscience is a disease, it's not a joke when I say it. Sister. We're all sick. Sister. Yes. And so if you don't eat, it's not because you're depressed, it's because you're not hungry, and anyway, who cares? Yes. Sister. If we don't eat, yes, I sometimes say sometimes but I'm not hungry. If you don't eat, you'll have hypoglycemia, discomfort, that's normal. Because your metabolism works with sugar. With the metabolism of fat, now, even though I normally eat without fat, I know that I just need to reconsume fat, not even a week, to avoid being affected by hypoglycemia or anything else. I'll never have any energy fluctuations, pump strokes, with the fat. Someone who eats sugar will sleep 10 hours a day, 8 hours. Someone who eats fat, I sleep 4 hours a night if necessary. Sister. If I want to sleep for 15 hours, I can also sleep for 15 hours. But as far as the need for sleep is concerned, it has been extremely reduced and not linked to age, really linked to the dietary mood. Sister. Yes, great. And once again, it's like what I was telling you about cholesterol, we have deceived humanity. But go tell people now, even if you explain it to them, that you have to eat fat, they will never want to. The average person will tell you but you're crazy. Laughs. The competent authorities said. Sister. I was thrown out when I said, well now we're going to eat fat. Autonomy is also that. It also means being responsible for the information we process. That's also what autonomy is all about. This is not only financial autonomy, internal autonomy, it is also autonomy with regard to information. Look at the number of information that is recorded and considered true, without going to check it. Sister. From a reliable source. Yet 90% of what is told is false. If it's not 100%. Sister. How can there be any possibility of repair in this type of universe and functioning? This system, as Taylor said, the consumer society necessarily leads to its own consumption. And that's exactly what we're seeing. People have forgotten that civilizations, whatever they may be, are born, appear, grow, diminish and disappear. It's constant. Wherever you look at the history of the Earth. Just because we have the technology doesn't mean we don't have to avoid the rule. And now we are in the entropy phase, that is, the destruction phase. Not to mention the end of time, or the end of illusion or anything. It obeys cycles, and we are obviously in the maximum entropy of the end of a cycle where the disorder will be total. It's evident. This is the very principle of what is called thermodynamics, in addition to that in a closed system, and not open since we are locked in. It is a system that can only shatter because it has become too complex. So in the minds of the elites, it doesn't matter, it's the end of time, and there's Nibia come in, and then we start again. Except then they won't start. But if you wanted to be relentlessly logical, whether you look at the physical side, the chemical side, the neuroscientific side, the behavioral, societal, philosophical level, it's evident. Only dreamers continue to dream that things will get better, that the energies are there, that the light is there indeed. But the light destroys the illusion. All that is illusory cannot be maintained in the light. Not everything that belongs to this world can penetrate the light. Silence. There you go. So the Earth is ascending, yes. But since the system is liberated and all creation is liberated, well, it is the end of the 7 universes. It was decreed last year, and that's how it will be. It can't be any other way. Wherever you take the objective, real and concrete analysis of everything that can happen at all levels, geophysical, societal, individual, collective, solar, in the whole solar system, everything contributes to the same truth. We still see, people are convinced even in spiritual circles that global warming is linked to humans. They will have to explain to us how the other planets in the solar system have warmed up and tilted their poles as well. Which will soon be the case for Jupiter. For the time being, it is the planets called the outer planets that have turned their poles, Pluto and Uranus and Neptune. That's also global warming. Sister. It is the entropic warming of that disorder, linked to a planetary body and dead stars that are in our solar system, and that are eating everything in their path, and that is the truth. We're in the middle of a black hole that's swallowing everything. I mean, it's not a projection or a spiritual vision. This is the objective reality of what is happening right now in the solar system. There is no way out other than the heart and love. It's up to you. And when people get tired and I talk about everyone here, I don't say the spiritual ones, or those who are sleeping, or those who are free, when everyone will be confronted, not with a choice because it's not a choice, but obviously with what's there. You can only accept to be what you are. There is no other choice. And who could refuse by living the love of being that love? For the moment, I have not seen any brother and sister who lives agape say, oh no, I don't want to live agape, none. As soon as the fire of the Sacred Heart is there, you're in such bliss, such completeness, that you will never imagine going to another dimension, another body, another form, or pursuing this world. That is not possible. This is what it means to remember the initial moment, which is nothing more than the final moment. It is this agape state. There's nothing else. The others are all dreamers or dream merchants who think they are preserving their pseudo-individualities. We're in each other, that's really it. So to pretend that you are you, and others are others, especially through spirituality, is something monumental. This is, they can't see. They did not like the truth. Without that, they couldn't do it. As I told you yesterday, for some authors who are very well known in the spiritual world and who allow themselves to write this through advent of danger, they have complete freedom to do so, but you can see very clearly through the sentences they write, which are written, they are the ones who wrote them, that it is not true. It's bullshit, they don't live anything. Sister, they deceive all the people who. Yes, they fool everyone, they take people on. Sister. It's been years. But we've all been fooling each other all along. It's not just about cheating on a couple. We deceive our children, we deceive our parents, we deceive everyone all the time. From the moment you are not real, that you are not totally authentic, that is, that you have not lived the truth, you deceive your world, even in your emotional, social and professional life. How else would you like to do it? So what I am saying here is neither black nor negative, quite the contrary, it is an invitation to really embrace this love that we are. That's all we are. Everything else, as was said again yesterday with Strength by Baidu, is fine. So we are frozen on our little void at this moment with its painful aspects, its aspects of confinement, and we forget the most essential one, it is what we really are. Eternal beings who know neither the fall nor the imperfection. Imperfection was built following oblivion and following confinement, that's all. And of course, all these points of view, energetic, psycho, spiritual, consciousness, will be shattered. Fortunately, in front of the beauty of this unspeakable love, that we are many to live. But again, you can't live it until you sacrifice yourself. And you can't cheat with this notion of sacrifice, because it's a neurochemical process. You can't lie to yourself. As long as you lie to yourself, even if you are convinced that you are truthful, you are not free. And all those who live agape, when we speak with them, who are in this agape state, tell us there is what I was before, there is what I am now. There is no doubt about it, there is no question about it. There is such evidence of this joy, such evidence of this peace, as I said, that you can only recognize yourself, and you cannot wonder about it until you experience it. But if you live it, you can no longer question yourself. It is a total recognition of this unspeakable love, which is not projected, which has not emanated, that we are. And as long as you put a personal element in front of, whatever it is, linked to a pseudo-individuality, you cannot be free for love. Until you love the most miserable and bastard, you are not free. But it is not something you can decide from the person, it is an evidence that sets in by itself when you have made the sacrifice of your person. So once again, do not understand sacrifice as, I cut everything off, I isolate myself in my mounting, I put myself in meditation, no. It is precisely in this ship that we must find ourselves, and it is besides, it is only in this ship that we can find ourselves, in the heart of the dream of creation, otherwise it is impossible. The other dimensional planes are just as dead as we are. Oh, of course it's completely revolutionary. Well, Baidu was revolutionary before me. The problem is that today we are not revolutionary against the system. We're the revolutionaries of a consciousness, because we live it, because we know it is true, because we know it is authentic, we know we are satisfied, but totally satisfied. Yes. And no one can ignore this moment of his reunion, because you see changes right away, at all levels. And once again, today why I am so positive is, because everyone can live it. There is no effort to be made. There's nothing there. It is just a matter of abolishing, without any will, this distance between the character you believe to be and the truth that is there. And to abolish it, well, you have to let the person disappear. As long as there is any personal desire, how can you be free? First the sacrifice, then the lived experience, which is understanding, and then things change. But if you change them in the wrong direction, you will never be free. And all your life, all the circumstances of this solar system and all creation will make you, we will have to remember. Fortunately, this is the event. So all the struggles you are having right now, whatever they are, with regard to freedom, are a waste of time. Change your body, as I said if you want, with dietetics, and then don't worry about anything else in this world. Find yourself. Go inside yourself, really. All the answers are there. It has been said by all mystics. The truth is hidden in the heart and nowhere else. Sister. And at the same time, it will be thanks to our fears that we will be able to enter towards us, because, yes, fears freeze access. Well, we've always said fear or love. If you're afraid, you cannot love, even if you want to. Sister. No, but it is by seeing your fears that you will be able to return to who you are. No. They are transcended by the love that you let express itself. Not by opposing you. Sister. Okay. It's not the character who. And it's going to be more and more true. Sister, it's not the character who does it. When we say fear or love, I remind you, it has already been replaced for many months by love or suffering. He who is love cannot suffer, it is impossible, on any level, even if he has to die. Love or suffering, it is up to you to see in your life if you're in love or if you are suffering. And if you're in pain, it's no use going to know why you're in pain. It simply means that you are giving too much conscience to your person, to your suffering, rather than to love. Sister, how do you want to find the impersonal by staying on the personal? There is no such thing. Silence. And it's true that with each satsang, I try to be more and more powerful, not because I try to convince anyone. It is not an ideology, it is not a concept. This is what happens before eyes, this is what happens in our body, in our consciousness for everyone today. Silence. As long as you think you are an individual, somewhere, you cannot be free. It all depends on what you put in the scene. So Christ had taught this. Either you love the other as much as you do, or you love yourself more than the other. You have to love each other, but you have to understand that the other is only you. And love it. It relativizes the notions of personal love, filial love, friendship even, of course, because you can no longer make a difference. You're living it. Living it is so evident. I tell you, we see right now, there is no need for subtle perceptions, to see the auras or, to feel the energies or to perceive anything. An agape being is a person's antithesis. At all levels. This does not prevent him from having personal problems to solve, if he has children, for example, or if he is still looking for a job. But the dynamics, the presentation, the behavior, the energy field, everything, absolutely everything, the words that are used by a being who is in agape no longer have anything to do with a person. I'm telling you, you can see it like a nose in the middle of your face, we've met enough to observe it constantly. Someone who is in this life, he will take you in his arms, he is always laughing, he is always lucid about what he is doing, he controls nothing, he is in spontaneity. And this spontaneity is called love. Whereas the one who does not live it is still subject to moral, behavioral, social, emotional rules, and he is not available for the present instant. And it shows. I had internships with 100 people like we had, or with 50 people, with a slightly larger number than here. You can see very clearly the difference in emanation, behavior, sentences that are used, words that are used, attentions that are used, by someone who is free and by someone who is not free. I'm telling you, it shows, I'm telling you, like a nose in the middle of your face. And the simpler you are, the freer you are. The more you are in the present instant, and the more spontaneous you are, the more free you are. Yes, you can even see it in the posture of the body, you can see it in the words that are used, in the brightness of the eyes, in the way you behave in relationships, you can see it at all levels. And it's getting more and more clear-cut. You have the impression that you are dealing with two humanities that are really, as Grandpa said, totally different. The Agapians have nothing to do with it anymore, they are totally human. I would say it was the average human being who became robots, really. It can be seen on the facial muscles that reflect what is called an individual's emotional state. It can be seen in the words that are spoken, in the actions that are taken, at all levels. And as I have been explaining for months now, every week it gets stronger, there is an increasingly obvious difference between those who are in fear, suffering, and those who are in love. You can't love and suffer, it's impossible. You may have pain, you may have a disease, even a fatal one, but you have pain, you do not suffer. Don't confuse pain and suffering, they're two different things. Silence. Suffering is linked to the idea of a personal consciousness. Silence. Again, that's what I'm giving you in terms of observation data. But it is perfectly explainable by neurosciences, by neurotransmitters. When you are anxious about the future, when you are constantly looking to the future, you're inundated with dopamine. When you are afraid, you are flooded with serotonin, with a deprivation of serotonin in the brain, which is called depression by the way. You're bathed in love, you're flooded with oxytocin. You're emotional, too sensitive, you're in a state of societal and social dependence, and you're flooded with norepinephrine. It's consistent with what I'm telling you here. It was found by an American psychiatrist about 20 years ago, what is called the neurobiological map of personality, called temperaments. And temperaments, behaviors, are only related to hormones, to neurotransmitters, which are arranged in groups without your knowledge of your own free will, according to your point of view, according to what you think. Silence. So all our choices are conditioned, in many ways. It is, as I say, when you no longer have a choice, you're free. As long as you have the notion of a choice, you are not free. Once again, remember that freedom is never an effort, that it is much more a relaxation, an abandonment, a sacrifice, but never the result of a personal will. Personal will strengthens the second chakra. Abandonment to the light and sacrifice open the chakra of the heart. It's mechanics. The problem, as I said, is that we are all affected by this circuit of punishment, as long as we are a person. The tendency to feel guilty, responsible, reinforced by the programming of social engineering. We're guilty of everything. Global warming is our fault, everything is our fault. So all the programming and semantics that is used is to reinforce guilt, and to reinforce security. In freedom, security means nothing, nothing at all. You're free to die tomorrow, and I repeat, that you have nothing to read tomorrow does not change anything. That too, again, I'm not saying that. That's what all the brothers and sisters who are agape say and whom I see every time. There are some who are in exchange with me, whom I see visually, with whom I converse, whom I meet in meetings. It's so evident, and it's visible. It shows, I tell you, when you have an assembly with many people, you see those who are in joy, those who are free, and all those who are attracted, I would say. They are not dilated, they are attracted. Silence. Another subject. Silence. We didn't take a break at all this morning either. I've been talking for 2.5 hours. We can actually cut that. We didn't take a break. 2.5 hours of talking is a lot. Sister. Yes. So that's it. We're done with the SATSANG. Through Jean-Luc Young. The Transformations. English translation, LMF.